Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get yourself a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro. With over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, man, you're spoiled for choice with something to listen to. So I know what you're going to do as soon as this show is ended. You're going to head over to audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro and pick yourself up something free today.
Now hear this. The following podcast is likely to contain numerous instances of vulgarity or profanity, which some may deem inappropriate. If you're of an overly sensitive disposition, stop listening now. Additionally, the podcast will be filled with numerous spoilers throughout, so if you haven't had an opportunity to read, watch, or enjoy the story prior to this broadcast, please do so, before continuing with this episode of Sweet Story, Bro.
Get ready for action! 3, 2, 1, fight!
Welcome back to Sweet Story, Bro. It's been a while, hasn't it? Have you guys missed me? Huh? I know I've missed you guys. So settle in for another episode of Sweet Story, Bro. Yes, that's right. We're back with Sweet Story, Bro, the only podcast that gets into the nitty-gritty of all the geek stories that you guys love. But if you're familiar, it's been a little while since we've done a show, and if you've been watching the channel on YouTube, the Sweet Story Bro YouTube channel with the sweet updates, you know why it's been a little while. You know what's caused that, what I've been up to, and what this show is now all about for you. Thank you, as always, for downloading this show and checking it out. I appreciate it, and I hope you really do dig what we're going to try here today, which is going to be something slightly different. You know, welcome to the first episode of the new format of the show, showcasing that, yes, your thoughts and feedback really do matter to me and have an effect in shaping this show, because it's not just my show, it's our show. I get a lot out of doing this show. I get a lot out of sharing it with you and hearing from you guys and hearing all the positive feedback. Sometimes the negative feedback too, man. That's just part and parcel of the game. If I'm going to do this, put myself out there, put my opinions out there, you're going to find people that disagree. And that's fine, as long as they let you know in a relatively constructive way and aren't just simply a bit of a fucking dick about it. I hope you enjoyed the last episode on the Man in the High Castle. I know it was a little while ago now, but hey, if you've been needing to catch up on a couple of episodes of Sweet Story Bro, that little interim, that little step away would have been the perfect opportunity for you to do it and experience all those stories that I wanted to share with you. But what have I been up to? You know, in this time away from the podcast to try and reformat it, reground it, give it a different style, give it a different vibe. Slightly. I mean, really, it's more about how we're going to be approaching the review side of things rather than going so in depth as the sweet update highlighted, and doing the more broader brushstroke. So that's what we're going to be doing here. Temporary is doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. Movement has been made in regards to more research on the agency front. The submission documents are all totally done. Long-term listeners know that. At this point in time in recording, haven't really reached out yet to anybody. Man, time just keeps slipping away and away. And the reason for that is I had a big birthday week this past week. I turned 30, and my God, I've never had an experience like that. I'm going to write about it on WriteSteveWrite.com. I did something. I never go on Facebook. I'm not a Facebook guy, though I do have an account. And I wrote a thank you message there because I know so many of my friends and family use Facebook. But my girlfriend, Thea, just went above and beyond. I cannot tell you how much love I have for that girl for just, you know, being so aware and in tune with the things that I like. And, you know, it's not even about the gifts, although the gifts were amazing. You know, I was absolutely spoiled rotten, just ridiculously so, with this birthday. I'm humbled by it because I don't deserve it and I don't deserve her. And I'm so grateful for having her in my life and for, you know, what she wanted to get from me. And some of it was incredible, man. I mean, we're going to Spain later on this year. That's a fucking surprise. And one of the big ones as well, was Harry Potter tickets. So we're going to go see the play The Cursed Child come next March, I believe it is. And I was so stoked for this because I was really I never realized how much I wanted to see it until some of my friends went to see it and were telling me about it. And obviously I didn't know. I didn't have the opportunity to see it. As far as I knew, it was completely sold out. And that much is still true. You can hawk tickets online, but they're a silly cost right now. 500, 600, 700 pounds for one ticket because the plays across 2 days. It's 2 plays. But what did Thea do? Oh my goodness. She procured tickets in February of this year in order for fucking next year. And she got us tickets for parts 1, part 2 on the same day. That's incredible. An entire day dedicated to this. I cannot wait. It's going to be amazing. Spain is going to be great. But that's not even all, man. You know, she got me a whole bunch of other stuff as well. And come the Saturday night, because my birthday was on the Friday, the 15th of July, the next day, she hustles me, and we go into this place that we've never really gone into before, only for me to be surrounded and face-to-face with so many people I care for, friends from all different walks of life, from people I go back to with, you know, to my teenage years, to my work colleagues that I'm very fond of, and even my jiu-jitsu guys who kick my ass week in, week out. Like, for them all to be there, and my family as well, and my sister who lives in Wales, for God's sakes, she was there with her family and her 2 beautiful girls, and my niece Amelia just ran up to me and gave me the biggest hug, and man, that was the moment that I was rooted back in myself, and everything just crashed in. It was like a wave crashing upon the beach. My senses returned to me, and I finally stopped just gawking like an idiot with the goofiest smile on my face. It was an amazing experience, and I use that word very specifically. It was an amazing birthday because Thea provided me with just a phenomenal experience. I've never had a birthday like it. I probably will never have a birthday like that again. And I'm so grateful for all the hard work that she put into that. So thank you so much. She can't even hear this. I don't know. She's not a Sweet Story Bro fan, I don't think. She doesn't really check out the podcasts when they come out. It's like Kev Smith's wife isn't a Kev Smith fan. Steve Russell's girlfriend is not a Steve Russell fan, it seems. But hey, that doesn't matter. I'm just happy to have her in my life and feel blessed because of it. And that's what I've been up to. And that's why Temporary, there's not been too much movement with it recently, is the build-up and honestly feeling very depressed about turning 30, followed by the birthday stuff that's turned into a week-long celebration, honestly. It's not the first time I've done this. Probably won't be the last time I do it either. But yeah, all the frivolity, all the festivity, all the celebration, it's just become a little bit of a secondary priority. Still up there, of course. It's been on my mind. I can't lie. It's one of the things that gets me down because just I need to get self-motivated with it. And one of my friends at work, who was kind enough, one of the very first people to read Temporary in its manuscript format, was like, just let me do it. I said to him, I'm scared to press the send button. Like, I want to give you all the materials and you can do it for me. But obviously, I'm the one that needs to click send, and there will be great gratification when that happens. But Thea and I made a toast last night, and I intend to stick to it. The toast was simply to 30 being the beginning and not the ending of anything. And in reference to that, of course, is Temporary. I've set myself up in my 20s here. It feels like working on Temporary, writing a book before turning 30, a full book, admittedly not published, but I've written a book. That is pretty cool. That's an accomplishment in and of itself, in my opinion. And I've set it up. Think of it. I've thrown the ball in the air. I've got the bat in my hand. First thing I need to do at 30, first thing is take a swing and knock that sumbitch out the park. And I'm going to fucking try. Believe you me. But anyway, on to the podcast. Just as a quick reminder, just in case you happen to pick and choose the episodes that you listen to, that's no problem. Don't get me wrong. But wouldn't it be so much easier to just simply subscribe? Subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher, however you prefer to listen to your podcast, and never miss a single one. They will automatically download to your podcast listening device of choice. And don't forget as well to hit up sweetstorybro.com, where you can find all the links for my social medias, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. So if I'm talking about Sweet Update Bro and you have no idea what I'm talking about because you don't know about the YouTube, well, there's no excuse. Hit up sweetstorybro.com, click on the YouTube icon at the top, get over there, hit subscribe. Never miss an update, never miss a show. All of your links are available at sweetstorybro.com. Everything you need for the show, all in one place, including Amazon links for all your purchasing needs. You don't pay any more, not a single cent or pence, depending where in the world you are. You pay the exact same price, but it gives a little percentage to the show. So I can put that back into the show. Server costs, new equipment, all this stuff obviously costs money, and you just doing your Amazon shopping as you would do anyway, just instead of going to Amazon.com, you click the link at the top of sweetstorybro.com. That would help me so much. Thank you to everyone who's already done it, and thank you if you're going to do it in the future. I appreciate that. But that, of course, brings us on to the all-important question, why this story? Why Star Wars, The Force Awakens? Why now, man? It's been a little while since that movie came out, even when it came out on Blu-ray and DVD a few months ago. Here's why. Last night, I was surprised with a final birthday present from a couple of friends that Thea and I have. One of my very good friends, one of my very best friends, Jamie, who I did the stream of Uncharted with, you might remember, although you may not have been able to hear what we were saying and the shit we were chatting because the audio is all messed up and unfortunately nobody really told us. And his wife, Ashley. The two of them decided to surprise me for my 30th birthday with tickets to a rooftop cinema club screening of Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, Jamie was kind of aware of the fact that I wanted to redux the format of the show, and I was explaining to him about it over coffee as we were waiting for the girls. And I just figured, after watching this, it was a surprise. Unfortunately, the guy behind me ruined it because he was informing the girl that he was with, who clearly had never seen a Star Wars movie in her fucking life. He was going into detail about every plot point from the previous 6 as much as possible before this one rolled, which obviously led me to speculate, hey, I think we're seeing a Star Wars movie here, because why the fuck else would he be playing all these clips from YouTube, telling her all these story details? They didn't care about spoiling it for everyone around him. I guess they didn't realize that people had surprise birthday gifts yet to experience, of which this was one, and the final one, I believe. Just for a little context about me, I mentioned this way back when in my Aftermath review by Chuck Wendig. I was never a huge Star Wars fan until recently, where honestly, I kind of finally accepted it into my life. Like, yeah, I'm a bit of a fan. I never used to hate it, because I didn't understand why it had such adulation, such rabid fandom. I still don't think it perhaps deserves the rabid fandom that it has, but I recognize it for the cinematic phenomenon it has become. The simple reason why, before you guys start gnashing at the teeth, is because, Episode 4 is such a standard trope. Everything is predictable. Everything is obvious. It's classic fantasy fairy tale stuff. And I guess other movies have done the same, but didn't get the reaction to this. Honestly, it's probably episodes 5 and 6, and then looking them all together, that's what helped elevate it within people's minds. And don't forget, of course, that I watched them on VHS for the first time. I was too young. I didn't see them in the cinema when they were first released, like some people that hold it near and dear to their heart, because I can only imagine what a cinematic treat, what an experience that would have been for them. My first cinematic Star Wars that I can remember going to the movies to see was episode 2. I didn't even see episode 1 at the cinema, I don't think. It was episode 2 and then 3 later on. Thank Christ, then, that they decided to bring it back so we could experience more, arguably maybe too much Star Wars. And some people want to shoot me with their blaster for saying such sacrilege, but a Star Wars movie every year, guys, every fucking year. You don't think that's a little bit too much? Hey. I'm not reviewing those movies, though. I'm reviewing this one, Star Wars, The Force Awakens. To answer the question I posed myself earlier, why wait so long? Why wait until the reformat of the show? Well, I mean, partly, yes, it was because it was the birthday present. And hey, it presented an amazing opportunity, no pun intended, to review this show for the podcast to make it the very first one. Go big with Star Wars, no less. And I wanted to wait as well until the initial furor had died down. I'm just going to lay this out here. First time really vocalizing, I believe. As a podcast rule going forward, I will review current movies normally when they are released on Blu-ray or DVD. And I intend to do this in order to ride the second wave of interest. Once they release and there's a little bit more marketing again and people going out and having an interest once more in it, that's when I'm going to be doing my reviews. Firstly, it allows me to watch it in more detail in the comfort of my home. If I need to pause and make a note or something like that, I can do, although my note-taking has changed now with this new format. It's interesting. I hope you guys like it. Of course, you got to let me know. You got to let me know. But more importantly, I didn't want my review to get lost in a torrent of reviews whenever a new movie is released. Right now, again, at this point in time of recording, which will date it for those for you guys when you do get around to listen to it, this is how prepared I try to be. Right now, it's Ghostbusters, Independence Day, movies like that. And you go on YouTube, you look on Modern Family, you look, and this is not a criticism, let me just state that, but everybody is reviewing the same movie because obviously it's hot, it's current, it's what's in right now. But at the same time, that does mean that my podcast playlist has about 5 or 6 podcasts all talking about the same fucking stuff. And that can become a bit of a bore. Your voice can get lost in that, which is why I made the key decision, wait, be patient, and review it when it gets a home release. Not only for that, but it also gives me more of an opportunity with the story to do the necessary research into the writing process and the choices that the writers or directors or writer-directors have made, or more importantly, authors, going forward looking at books and things like that. But that is why I am looking at Star Wars right now. This movie had a lot of pressure going into it to be successful because it was never going to bomb. Let's not be silly. It was never, ever going to tank. But it could have potentially maybe have done under expected. I mean, I'm saying that right now. I'm shaking my head, man, because that's almost ridiculous. I mean, surely everybody involved in this movie knew it was going to do gangbusters. But they said the same thing about Phantom Menace. They said the same fucking thing about Episode 1. We didn't want another Episode 1 on our hands. Is that what we got? Let's find out. So the first thing to really mention about the story is just, honestly, it's a little bit of a fantastic continuation, an addition to the series, but not one without its faults. And the faults that are there, although niggling, they don't detract from the experience of what the movie is. This is the this rooftop screening is the third time that I've seen this movie. I saw it when it came out in December. I saw it early January with my parents, which was like the last movie. I don't even remember the last time they went to the cinema, so I was glad I was able to drag them out for that. And I saw this time as a surprise, which was a wonderful surprise, as I've already mentioned. But it does have minor faults. But it just doesn't... I honestly don't think that those faults, even accumulated, come close to the spectacle of what this movie was. And yes, the effects are great. The visuals are wonderful. But is the story any good? And are the characters good? Do they add and contribute to the story? Honestly, the main characters are true to the original. I'm not only just talking about the reappearance of Han Solo, Chewbacca, Princess Leia, 3PO, R2-D2, I'm talking about the spirit of the original movies encapsulated within the new cast members. Daisy Ridley as Rey, John Boyega as Finn, and you got Poe Dameron as well, Oscar Isaacs, and of course you have Kylo Ren, and it doesn't have a single line of dialogue in the entire movie that we can understand, but BB-8 damn near steals a whole fucking show. That droid is adorable. They are able to get across so much with him, and he's just a sphere with a little thing on the top of the ball to signify a head. But the way that he moves, the things that he does, using the lighter as a thumbs up, slowly moving down to show sadness. Man, the way they BB-8 rocked it. BB-8 is probably one of the major highlights in this movie for most people, and it's unsurprising as to why. But these characters, they are great additions to the lore of Star Wars. They're great additions to the mythology and the long-running now canon Although, we're not talking about expanded universe stuff just here. Again, if you want that, check out the Chuck Wendig review I did. It is in the older style, but I hope there's something there for you as we discuss that story in great detail. And I find it really interesting that they reintroduce some of the older characters, especially in the way that they do it. Han Solo running aboard the Millennium Falcon that Rey and Finn had stolen back from Jakku as they fly away and are taken in randomly. Of all the places in all the universe that ship could be at that point in time, they happen to be there is a little bit odd, honestly. A little bit contrived, perhaps, unless I missed something completely. But I managed to pull and find a really cool quote from J.J. Abrams on Han Solo, and he's addressing the unspoken events that have clearly occurred between episodes 6 and 7. We're talking about a period of, 30 years or something like that in between? That's almost a lifetime. I've just turned 30. That is a lifetime between then and 60 or 70 or whatever. I think Harrison Ford is like 73, something like that. I mean, that's a long while ago. And he has this to say, and I quote, the moment when you reconnect with someone after years apart, you see the lines on their face. You think, oh, they've lived 10 years. Or when you see someone has a scar they didn't have, physical or emotional, you recognize it. It lets you know it's not 2 minutes later. It was important that Han Solo be Han Solo, but not feel like he's playing a 30-year-old dude. When you're 70, you will have lived a different set of experiences. That has to be apparent in who he is. Harrison was required to bring a level of complexity that a 30-year-old Han wouldn't be required to have. End quote. JJ, he helped to craft this story with the help of Lawrence Kasdan, who helped write Empire and Return of the Jedi, as well as Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you're unfamiliar with the amount of movies Lawrence Kasdan helped to shape in the 80s, do yourself a favor, look it up. I promise you the majority of them are probably already going to be your favorites, and you don't even realize that he was the guy behind the pen writing those words for you to enjoy and love. Yeah, he's great. I mean, they did have another writer initially attached as well, who was Michael Arndt, who I believe actually won an Oscar for Toy Story 3, which is an amazing movie, by the way. But it didn't work out between them, so they re-brought in Lawrence Kasdan, who originally was just going to be a consultant, and ended up helping to really script and form the story with JJ over a period of time. They would take long walks together in different cities, recording themselves talking on an iPhone as they just spitballed ideas. It sounds like a wonderful creative process to be able to hang out with either of those geniuses and just come up with stuff together over coffee. It sounds wonderful. But this is one of the main things, one of the main awesome elements of this character is you can see that conveyed in the way that they move, the way that they talk, the things that they do, how they dress. If Han had come out and he was still wearing that same thing, they make a little joke about it during the movie, You changed your hair, he says to Leia. Same jacket, she quips. No, different jacket, he responds. Little things like that, I mean, they can't be exactly the same person, and I think that the story does a great job of showing that they've gone through a lot of stuff in this time period without hitting us over the head with what it is. That's where the expanded universe could come in, or, even if that's not how you prefer to take in your sci-fi, if you don't care about that, you can just be aware as an audience member that, yes, something has happened here. And even for younger audience members that maybe aren't so au fait with the older movies, if they've never seen this, if Star Wars The Force Awakens was their very first experience, I think you can tell that there's a history. The way that they play it off is very good. And the way it's written in order to play that off is also very good. Normally, I don't talk about visuals too much when I review a story because obviously I want to look at the nitty-gritty of the story. But with this and a new format, it's hard not to. The visuals within this movie help to tell a story. And arguably you can say that about any medium, like a TV or movies. The way they dress tells a story. The things in their room tells a story. The mise en scène, all that stuff helps to develop character development. And it's true. It's true. You can't ignore it because these are choices made by departments that are helmed by their department heads that have to get the okay by the director. Unfortunately, not normally the writer, but the director has to give the okay on it. But the visuals within The Force Awakens tells such a story. It is pretty much flawlessly directed by J.J. Abrams, such a confident hand at the rudder of this ship. And it is gorgeous to look at. From Jakku's deserts and the downed Imperial destroyers to the new ships that they fly around in to, you know, the lush greenery that Maz Kanata, I think that's her name, her little cantina is on. You know, these places look amazing and they add so much to it. And one of the reasons they look so amazing is because it's in a tactile environment. And this was a purposeful choice, well documented from JJ, that they wanted to use as little CGI as possible as a storytelling technique, which really helps to ground the experience of the viewer as we watch it, because you're looking at it and like when they're inside the Falcon, for example, in the cockpit, and you look around and you're like, well, these are actual dials they could turn. This is something they can use. That's a steering wheel they can turn. You know, that's awesome. That's real. That's not an over-reliance on CG, which, as great as CGI is and can be to help to tell a story, sometimes it can look a little dated over time. You look at some of the older movies now. You look at Reloaded, Matrix Reloaded, and maybe Reloaded more. Like the CG, the Agent Smith fight, the 100 Agent Smith fight at the time was revolutionary. It was amazing. I remember being in awe of that when I first saw it because I love the Matrix. Maybe not all the movies, but I love the Matrix. But that scene was definitely kick-ass. You know, it was amazing. But you watch it back now and everything's rubber. Everything's rubber-faced. And that's not to say the CGI was bad. It's just they worked within the limitations of what they had at the time. And that's why some of the older movies aged so well, is because they were using tactile, real things to engage with. Ghostbusters, for example, brought it up earlier, I'll mention it again. The original, where they use ghosts and, you know, stop motion and all this stuff, looks amazing. Still holds up. It still holds up. Thea had never watched Ghostbusters until recently. I made her watch that a few months ago, just so that she had a concept of what the Ghostbusters was and why it meant so much to so many people. It was great rewatching that movie. It still holds up, obviously. Now, on that, I have pulled a couple of quotes here in order to just give a little bit of further context about what the writers, JJ and Lawrence Kasdan, were trying to achieve by making this story technique, this choice, about wanting everything grounded within reality. First, JJ, and this is taken from an interview from /film.com, and he's talking about locations giving authenticity. And I quote, "I remember seeing the sandcrawler and all the scenes that took place in front of those giant treads and feeling like, that's impossible, they're real. And it's because they actually built that piece of the sandcrawler. I remember seeing the hangar and not knowing where and how the matte painting begins and the in-camera shot ends. It was so miraculously visually authentic, and it was one of the reasons why Kathleen Kennedy and I decided very early on that's what this movie needs to feel like. Which is why when it would have been easier and cheaper and faster to not go to Abu Dhabi, it wouldn't have looked as good if we hadn't. It would have been easier not to travel to Wales or Ireland or Iceland or to build all these sets, exterior and interior, that we did. There are a lot of other ways to approach the movie that I think would have been okay, but it was so important that we made this movie feel authentic as much as possible." End quote. And I actually do have a quote from Lawrence Kasdan as well, speaking on the same thing about wanting to use minimal CGI. And this is taken from craveonline.co.uk. Quote, "I think that the first trilogy is funky and goofy and emotional and human. It's about real people moving through real sets. It's real costumes. It's about puppets that are tangible. It's not about CGI. You know there's plenty of CGI in this movie, but it's only by necessity instead of choice." End quote. Now, I mean, I've spoken a bit about the characters and how well they fit within the universe and things like that. You know, I do believe that Rey is great as a strong female lead character. I don't necessarily believe in the Mary Sue argument that's been made about her, and I'm only going to touch on that briefly because that's an opinion piece for something else completely. It's not, that doesn't have any impact on the review on this story because it didn't mire my feeling on it. Though I do think that Max Landis did have merit in his argument that she's basically untouchable. She's never in any true danger because of how she reacts to it, and we're never sold on the fact that she could be in danger because she comes across so flawlessly and brave at all times. He compares her, for the wrestling fans out there, he compares her to John Cena, Super Cena. No matter the odds, no matter what gets stacked against him, you know he's going to be okay and he's going to come through because, hey, it's John Cena. And I can definitely see where the argument comes from in relation to Rey's character. An issue I did find with this movie in relation to the characters was that if you weren't a primary character, if you were relegated to a secondary or, God forbid, even a tertiary character appearance, you were hardly developed. Or at best, you're just a brushstroke villain. Yes, it potentially sets up further payoffs in future movies, and I'm talking directly in reference to characters like Snoke and Captain Phasma, especially Captain Phasma, who there was a big deal about her being in this movie, a big deal about the Chrome stormtrooper who happened to be a woman, and she's barely in it. Barely in it. Hardly worth having her in there at all, really. I mean, there's payoff, I suppose, at the beginning. Breadcrumbs are dropped when she has to go, because she's the leader of Finn's unit, and when they come back and break in later on in the movie in order to try and save Rey, who of course doesn't need help anyway, Finn gets in her face. It's like, who's in charge now? Who's in charge now? I mean, who doesn't? Who's never wanted to do that, to their superiors, if you will, especially if you feel they don't know best. J.J. Abrams has this to say on the forming of this story with an eye towards the future. Again, taken from slashfilm.com, and I quote, "We didn't write a treatment, but there are countless times we came up with something and said, oh, this would be so great for episode 8, or that's what we could get into 9. It was just that kind of forward-moving story, but we knew this had to neither be a backwards-moving nostalgic trip only, nor a beginning of a movie without a satisfying conclusion, and that was part of the balancing act. Embracing what we have inherited and using that where and whenever possible to tell a story that hasn't been seen yet." End quote. Remember that, where he says to tell a story that hasn't been seen yet. That will lead on to the biggest problem I have with this movie and its story. I think that there's potentially an over-reliance on nostalgia. If we were to come to this movie fresh, I touched on this earlier, if you were a kid and you'd never, ever seen Star Wars before, you had no inkling, and your dad or your mom took you out, or your granddad at this point, what a cool thing, a full family fucking outing, and this is your first Star Wars movie ever, how would that story translate to you? You may not know who Vader is, and the only appearance of Vader would be his mangled helmet to you and what Kylo Ren has to say about him. These are interesting ways to look at it, and I don't think J.J. Abrams has nailed that on the head with how they've actually approached it, because this is a pretty traditional fantasy story. Honestly, it's a fantasy story in the same way that Episode 4 was. It does have the slight twist, of course, where the quote, and I'm going to use these terms loosely, so if anybody wants to be offended, please don't be offended. Don't mean to offend you. The princess, Rey, quote-unquote princess, rescues herself. She's very self-reliant, and there's that scene on Jakku where, Finn tries to help her, and he runs over as she's kicking the shit out of everybody around her, and he just kind of stops in awe. And when they're running towards the junkyard before they take the Falcon for the first time, and he constantly tries to grab her hand, and she's going over and over again, stop taking my hand, don't take my hand. She can do it herself. We get it. She's like a strong, independent woman. She don't need no man. I understand. I get it. You don't need to cram that down my throat. And funnily enough, this made it into my pro and con columns because of that. I think it's great that you have a strong female character. I think it's bad to constantly have to reiterate that fact. I think that the way that she acts is enough, I thought it was funny when she was saying, don't take my hand. But did she need to say it time and time again? I don't think so. Not really. I've got this quote from J.J. Abrams. I'm structuring the story to appeal to new and old fans. I was just touching on, if you're a kid just coming to it for the first time, or if you've been watching these since day one when it first released in theaters. He said this to Wired.com, and I quote, "We wanted to tell a story that had its own self-contained beginning, middle, and end, but at the same time, like A New Hope, implied a history that preceded it and also hinted at a future to follow." End quote. Well, we definitely touched upon pretty much every element of that quote up until this point in this review, and I think that they've done a good job of that. Though, is it self-contained? I don't know about that. I don't think that much is true. They may have written the story, but I don't think it's completely self-contained because there's way too much of an eye towards the future, as we know with how they've written it. It's also interesting to observe that J.J. Abrams has never considered Star Wars to be science fiction in a classical sense. He's considered it more of a spiritual story. And I have this interview where he states as such from Slash Film once more, and I quote, To me, Star Wars was never about science fiction. It was a spiritual story. It was more of a fairy tale in that regard. For me, when I heard Obi-Wan say that the Force surrounds us and binds us all together, there was no judgment about who you were. This was something that we could all access. Being strong with the Force didn't mean something scientific. It meant something spiritual. End quote. And I really think that was an element within the story that he tried to bring out within The Force Awakens, which is why I pulled that quote in the first place. That spirituality of the Force and how it pulls at you. Just look at Kylo Ren when he's hating everything. One of my favorite things about this story was the use of the little things. Little things that could have gone over your head on a first viewing, second viewing. Hell, I'm sure I've missed loads of stuff even in a third viewing, even though I was purposefully looking across the screen to see if there were other things I could cling on to, little Easter eggs, if you will. But some of the, and this is going to be an oxymoron, so bear with me, the big little things that are obvious but so minor but add so much to telling the story. The blood on Finn's stormtrooper helmet, the First Order helmet at the beginning, which helps to mark him out to us, specifically the audience. Such a clever storytelling technique, such a smart visual cue to let us know, oh, that's the stormtrooper that's not acting like all the other stormtroopers. He's got a problem with the massacre that Kylo Ren's just ordered here, and we can now differentiate him from the rest, because they all look the same, of course, because of the blood on his mask. Awesome move. Awesome. Very, very smart. The 3D chess game on the Falcon, as well as the ball that Luke uses to practice the Force on within the earlier movies, again, is amazing. That's fan service. That's for long-term fans that love everything about it. You know, they're the ones that have rewatched the original trilogy a ton of times, you know, all this stuff. For them to see that. Now, the 3D chess one is a little bit obvious. There's a good 5 seconds of it on screen as Finn looks disbelievingly at it. But the ball that Luke uses, he picks up and throws it away within half a second. Like, you got to be eagle-eyed to see that. And it was awesome to see it. I do think that the story is pretty well paced, if only because of how it follows a traditional arc and traditional plot points. It's so standard. It's so standard, but this is what's beautiful about stories and storytelling. Even the most standard story can be beautiful if given to the right people, because they can do new things with it. They can add little twists, little turns. So even though they have, yes, okay, here's the turning point of Act 1. They've left the planet. Nothing's going to be the same for them again. They met each other, and we know our main cast of characters, and Finn and Rey are together with BB-8. They have been imbued with purpose. I get it. Cool. New adventure. That's perfect. They set that up brilliantly. It was great writing, really honed, really tight, really condensed. There's no real flab in this, I don't think. I think it's all good. It is paced so well that it really breezes by quite quickly. I mean, when we get to the second act turn and the fallout fight between Kylo Ren and Finn, and then Rey after Finn is felled by Kylo Ren with a fucking vicious lightsaber up the back, and Rey takes that blue lightsaber, Luke Skywalker's lightsaber that she found in the cantina, and they fucking have it out. Like, that is a moment that has definitely been earned over the course of the movie. And, you know, little things again, like the reintroduction of the lightsaber as a whole within the cantina scene. And she has a little flashback where we see little Rey and she's being left, and the mystery, who's her parents? That's really being hammered home time and time again, because they had her alone within the husk of an Imperial Walker. All the days that she's been there, she's scratching out. She can barely survive, getting quarter portions a day for whatever she's able to rustle up. You know, things like that. It's a hard life for her, and she plays it very, very well. But the pacing is great. And so when you get to these bigger moments in the later acts, they all feel earned, like we've been taken on a journey, and here is the payoff. And of course, the big one that is, even though it is the way it's shot, the way it's built up, it's obvious. There's no secret. Even the dumbest cinema goer is going to get this. And I feel sorry for you if you happen to be sat next to or nearby one of those fucking assholes that read a situation that's basically being spoon-fed to them, and then they go, this is going to happen. Like obnoxiously loudly, and then it happens, and they're like, I told you so. I said that because I'm really fucking smart, mate. I thought that was going to happen, and then it happened, and I told you, and then it did. Fuck you. Fuck you. I hate you. I hate that kind of person. You're a dickhead. Yes, this scene telegraphed itself horrendously. You could see the setup coming a million miles away, but it does not pull away from the gut punch of what it was. Han Solo's death at the hands of his son, Kylo Ren. I mean, we're introduced to the fact that Kylo Ren is his son very early on in the movie, which answered one of the great mysteries going into it. You know, who is Kylo Ren? Who is he related to? Who could he be? One of the big ones, of course, was, hey, he could be Luke Skywalker himself. That would have been a pretty cool twist. Skywalker going dark was always an appealing idea. I think that's a very neat idea. I've not really read the expanded universe too much, so if that has happened, let me know. That's something I'd like to read to all the Star Wars fans out there, and if you're aware of it. But the way that they do Solo's death, again, even though you can telegraph it, it doesn't change the sucker punch of what it is once that lightsaber guts him, and the look on Kylo Ren's face, hued in red. Not the blood, but his lightsaber, his cross saber. And it's Han Solo's death that actually slingshots us into new unknown territory that's filled with agency, purpose, and of course, sadness amongst the entire rebellion. I mean, Kylo Ren is immediately an interesting antagonist. You know, he looks good, he sounds interesting. Who is he? There's mystery to him, and which we all know JJ loves. Look at Lost, look at everything he's ever done. He loves fucking mystery. And he's one of the more compelling new characters because of this. He has an obsession with legacy. He's fueled with desire to meet his grandfather's perceived, you know, his own perceived expectations of what his grandfather would want with him. His grandfather, of course, being Darth Vader, man. Being the progeny of the loins of Han and Leia. And, you know, he's mired. And it's a weird way to look at it. He's mired by the love for his family. And there's a great scene, I mentioned it earlier, where he fears the light calling him. And it is such a good twist on what's normally there. You know, somebody's scared about embracing the darkness. Somebody's scared about falling and becoming somebody they don't want to be. But here he is, scared about falling back into the light, being pulled back by the light. And he doesn't want that. And so he asks his father for his help, to help him make a decision, to help him for once and for all. Han so naively tells him, as only a father could, I would imagine, that he would do anything to help. Of course he will. He just wants his son back, Ben. Little did he know, of course, that would lead to his demise. As he falls, not only is he skewered, but he then falls down this huge fucking pit because they're over this bridge within this facility. I mean, not only do we get the intensity of Kylo Ren, but we also get some really great comedy moments with him as well. Like when he's told about the BB-8 unit being lost, and the fact is with Finn and they mentioned Rey, and at that point he loses his shit and just fucking scrapes up the wall with his lightsaber. And when he's losing his shit later on after Rey's escaped and trying to leave the facility after she's been kidnapped at the turn of Act 2, and he goes to where she's being kept, the cell, and she's not there, so he has another fucking hissy fit and rages everywhere as two stormtroopers turn around the corner, see what's going on, and then turn away. Great little moments like that just help to alleviate the tension. They strike such a great balance throughout this entire story, where it's intense and broody, mysterious, adventurous, and comedy. Like, it is a fairy tale. It may be set against a backdrop of stars and Imperial stormtroopers First Order stormtroopers and Death Stars and all this stuff and the Force, but it's a fairy tale. It couldn't be more classic because of it. Now, it's not all great. There are a couple of, like I said, minor quibbles that I have with this movie. One is that I find Finn at times to be very stupid. Childlike almost in how he approaches situations in the world, though trying to think about this logically as I wrote this point, everything he experiences once he escapes with Poe is his first experiences outside of the First Order at all. He's never known a life outside of the First Order, and this is his first time experiencing that. So it does make sense that he approaches everything with an almost childlike wonder, and also especially explains how he falls for Rey so quickly. It's essentially, you're the first girl I've ever seen. I love you. Especially when she kicks ass. Like, how impressive is that? She's very cool. Very cool for that. I mean, on the characterization side of things for the story, Kylo Ren is very emo. I mean, there are like little Twitter accounts, parody Twitter accounts of emo Kylo Ren. If you've not checked it out, I recommend you do because they are pretty funny. But he is so crazy emo, it's crazy. Yeah, so crazy, it's crazy. You know, the only notes I wrote down here, because this is pretty much how he felt, is, I hate you, Mom. I hate you, Dad. I just want to embrace the dark side. God, Granddad understood me. Why can't you? That is Kylo Ren kind of in a nutshell. I mean, obviously there's more complexity to him than that, but if you really want to break him down into a pastiche, if you wanted to be able to just do a fucking 2D version of him, that is 2D Kylo Ren. Hates everything around him, doesn't want to take responsibility for himself. He's basically a sullen, emo teenager. And, I mean, the biggest problem I have with this movie, the biggest problem, yes, it perfectly sets up for future episodes, despite this constant air of familiarity. And we've read some great quotes earlier, you know, that I asked you to remember, you know, keeping an eye towards the future, all this stuff. The biggest problem with this movie, hands down, with this story, no less, obviously because that's where we're looking at from, it is pretty much a beat-for-beat retread of Episode 4, New Hope, and there's no getting around that. You can't ignore that. It was like the first thing I noticed come the credit roll the first time I saw it. I left it having enjoyed the movie. I had a hell of a time, but I felt like I'd seen it all before. It really does leave you with a feeling of being there, done that, literally got the t-shirt, like, show us something new. You know, and this is broken down, you know, not only into familiar beats, like Blue Eye, like the good guy longing to leave their status quo, longing to leave their world behind for unknown adventure. You know, yes, Luke wanted to leave because he was bored, and Finn wanted to leave because he doesn't agree with the First Order's methods or means or what they're all about anymore. But they both have to have that inciting incident that drives them into leaving, giving them purpose to leave. I mean, arguably a lot of stuff happens to Luke, whereas Finn does more, but it doesn't change the beat by beat that they then experience, which is pretty much, you could lift one movie and just call it another and it'd still be the same, essentially. You know, you got yourself another Death Star. You got yourself another cantina scene where information is passed around. You got yourself the quote-unquote princess, once more captured low point, which turns the second act, and then another rescue scene. And yes, they do flavor it with modern tendencies, which is great, don't get me wrong. You know, the girls being able to look after themselves, guys are kind of dopey, you know, and Finn, again, that childlike naivety, because you still have Han until he gets skewered, being Han Solo, and he's pretty boss no matter what. But it is essentially the same story. And if you can't see that, I recommend going to watch Episode 4 and then watch Episode 7 straight after. You will be bored, not because it's a bad movie, but because you're just like, hey, I've already seen this. Like, what's going on? I've got a couple of quotes. In fact, I have a quote here, which I think is very illuminating in this respect. And it gave me pause for thought. And I really wanted to throw in and see what you guys thought about this too. Lawrence Kasdan said this on the Reputation of Story Beats. And it's taken from, Repetition of Story Beats. And it's taken from craveonline.co.uk. And I quote, this is the question that was posed to him initially, by the way. As a storyteller, does that give you the freedom to be cyclical, or is that a potential danger? I'm thinking of how, on the poster, we saw what looks like another Death Star, for example, or something similar to it. And Kasdan answers with this. You know, it's a danger if it doesn't satisfy. But the problem is, the thing is that one person's sitting here in the theater and one person's sitting here. One person's totally satisfied by it, and the other one says, oh, it's another Death Star. The one who likes it may say, I love Death Stars. And the one who's next to him may say, why can't they come up with a different thing? So the question is, in the overall, do people feel satisfied or not, happy or not about what we've done? And do we? I can tell you, for me, I feel really good about it, and I've seen it 7 or 8 times, end quote. And yes, it's that feeling, ultimately, isn't it? You know, yes, it's the same story. Yes, we've seen it all before. It's the same mythology. It's the same lore. It's pretty much beat for beat the same as A New Hope. But was it still good? Was the story officially too sweet or just not sweet enough? Honestly, I feel that despite an overwhelming sense of familiarity in the way that Episode 7 retreads Episode 4, again, in that almost beat-for-beat way, The Force Awakens is undeniably a storming return that brings Star Wars back in a big way to popular culture. The story, it keeps you engrossed throughout in a lighthearted, adventurous way, yet without letting up from the pressure and sinister designs that the First Order have planned for this universe. Their actions never lack malice, that's the First Order's, or danger, and present them as a horrifying evolution of what came before them. Again, referencing what came before without necessarily pointing it out. You know, things like the Empire, the Imperials, etc. Even if their plans are a lather, rinse, repeat performance of the Death Star plans, which, again, can't get around that, totally undeniable. The new heroes are immediately likable, despite some minor quibbles, as I've mentioned. Finn's stupidity, Rey's constant need to show that she don't need no man, they great. All right, they great. But only in the slightest of ways. And certainly, as I said, doesn't impede on the addition and contribution that they have to the story, because they are the main characters. Rey even more so than Finn. But they each have their own story to tell, and they're both interesting from different sides. It's just amazing how they've come together here. And the story does a great way of organically bringing them together. Even if Finn just wants to get away from Jakku and everybody seemingly just never wants to leave it. I gotta say, overlooking the similarities to Episode 4, The Force Awakens still fits into that very traditional storytelling form, unfolding in a predictable, well-paced manner, with the first act ending where it should, and an impact end of second act with Solo's death at the hands of his own son, which does create an engaging fall from grace for Kylo Ren as he embraces the dark side once and for all. I, for one, cannot wait to see where this character goes with Episode 8. Again, all the characters I want to see what happens to, because Finn, he doesn't recover by the end of this episode. Remember, Kylo Ren gashed him up the back in their final battle before escaping, before the world starts to tear apart, literally tear asunder. And Finn, the last time we see him, is at the Alliance base, the Rebellion base, just unconscious, as Rey says, we'll meet again, before going to go meet Luke Skywalker, because she can finally do so, because they've got both of the pieces of the maps together. That was what was given to Poe Dameron and BB-8 at the very beginning, was another piece of the map that R2-D2 had the larger portion of, so they were then able to calculate where in the universe Luke Skywalker was. But fucking R2-D2 just decided to be on low power mode forever, and they just slung a fucking a blanket over him. I never really bought that. Like, R2-D2 would surely be a respected member of the Alliance, given everything that that droid has done. So to just put him in the background like a piece of furniture and have a blanket over him doesn't really seem to respect him in the same way that I would have thought he would have deserved. Some might say he's just a droid, but no, he was a droid that helped lead the Resistance, helped to overthrow the Empire, for God's sakes. Like, don't just put him in the corner with a blanket over his head. Come on. And then, of course, the last scene has Rey awkwardly offering Luke Skywalker his lightsaber back for what feels like an eternity before the credits finally roll. I mean, this story has numerous memorable moments, and it's the exact kind of movie that will have kids recounting those favorite bits over lunch or dinner together, like after the movie. Like, what was your favorite part? This was mine. Oh, yeah, I loved it when this happened. And, man, I remember doing that after coming out of movies when I was a kid, too. And it's so wonderful to see a movie that can capture the imagination of the new generation whilst respecting and adding to the legacy of all that Star Wars is and will become for the old guard. Honestly, the best way that I can really break down Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, is like this. Imagine your most favorite band in the whole entire world did a cover song of another of your favorite band's songs. And you listen to it and you go, holy shit, like this, I know this song. Like, that band did it. But man, this is a really good cover, if not slightly better in places. That's how I feel about this movie. You've heard it before, you've heard this song, but it's just as good, if not better in places. Sometimes the cover can be better. Sometimes. So I can hear you clamoring, man, where does it fall? How does it fall on the scale that you use? Sorry, it's a one-man show after all. I'll tell you. Despite some minor issues, some broad brushstrokes for villains, and some stupidity on the hero's side of things, the story being one that we've tread before and are so familiar with, there's enough here to keep you engaged. There's enough here that it feels like a fresh coat of paint. Like I say, it's a cover song, but maybe one that's even better than the original. Star Wars The Force Awakens is officially too sweet. And that's it, man. That's the first episode done of the new format. I'm going to keep the numbering system, so this is still number 16, of course, and we're going to keep going forward from there, onwards and upwards and whatnot. But I want your feedback. What did you think? This was that more rounded review we were talking about, but still looking at it from a writer's perspective. Why were these choices made? Why did this happen? Talking about the major pros and cons that I had with the story, the characters, and what comprised its arcs and so on and so forth. Not in that breakdown, beat by beat, taking that step back and looking at it as a broader picture. Did you enjoy it? Did you like it? Do you need some further tweaks? Do you want some further tweaks? Let me know. So thank you so much for listening. And you can get in contact with me, of course. You know how this goes. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, email, wherever you want. And if you want to check out the story yourself, hey, why not purchase it via Amazon on the links on sweetstorybro.com. Like I said at the top, no more expensive for you, and it kicks back a percentage to help the show. Plus, you will have yourself a copy of Star Wars The Force Awakens on DVD or Blu-ray. Everybody wins. Be sure, actually, on that note, to jump over and hit up the YouTube so you don't miss out on any future sweet updates, which is where I first announced the fact that this format was changing. Or, regarding the Uncharted retrospective playthroughs that we still have to do, because now things have changed. Now the format's different. I have to rethink about how I'm going to do those, so that's going to take a little while longer. I do apologize. Bear with me. This will go down in legend and myth and history is something that I keep talking about, but it's coming. Just like the dragons in fucking Lord of the Rings, in Game of Thrones, right? They're coming. The dragons are coming. The Uncharted retrospective is coming one day, but with having to do this entire difference, in format, of course, that's going to make it take a little while longer. But I'll tell you what, if you did like the episode, let me know through the feedback. And if you really like the episode, if you dig what I do here for you with these reviews, why not leave a tip? A couple of bucks maybe, less than a cup of coffee or a cupcake, and it helps the show to no end. And it's super easy to do. You just go to paypal.me/sweetstorybro. paypal.me/sweetstorybro. So until next time, man, be sure to share the show with your story-loving friends, too, Don't bogart this stuff. Now it's more of a general review. Yes, we talk about spoilers and we get into the bit of detail in the story in order to express what brings us all together. It's that love of story. Share the love, spread the conversation, tell your friends, get them listening, get them recommending stuff for me to read, watch, or whatever else in order to review. So until next time, be sure to keep your eyes on Twitter for the Monday mention. And I implore you to please go enjoy some stories. I'm out. If you liked listening to this review of Star Wars The Force Awakens, the movie itself, and you're curious about the fact that, hey, did you know there was an audiobook adaptation of this movie? Well, you do now, and I'll tell you what, you can get it for free through me at audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro. Narrated by Mark Thompson, Star Wars The Force Awakens can be yours today for nothing. If you head over to audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro, you get to download an audiobook of your choice for free, as well as sampling their service for up to 30 days. So what are you waiting for, man? Go grab yourself something free today at audibletrial.com/sweetstorybro.